All right, so gosh darn, another try, another attempt. This is an important one, very personal. I really like this one. It's June 11th. Whew, I've said this before. It's so funny. I woke up not thinking about this at all. Just had a headache, dehydrated. It went away. And then kaboom. Boy, it just starts percolating. It goes so fast. And then some quotes and some stories come up, and then I just have to do it. But this one's dear to my heart. I guess we should put it that way. Um, as I've said many times before, I don't identify with any one religion. I read that book. I just wanted to understand Christianity because so many of my clients were Christians, and I read that book some 35 years ago, Idiot's Guide to Christianity, and whatever happened, it just this explosion occurred, and the similarity or oneness of all religions. It's yeah. So I love the Hindu Vedanta Hindu mantras. One is many paths, same end, same God, and the other is many words for the same truth. And that's kind of what comes about with this video, but I think it's much deeper, much more interesting than that. Um, but I don't identify with any particular religion. I just think they're all so masterful, so beautiful. You find your path. So that leads into, as you know, also in my other videos, I've quoted Gandhi from the movie a lot. And one of the things Gandhi was doing was trying to unify the various religions into a oneness, that being Hinduism, Muslims, and Sikhs are the three that he mentioned a lot in the movie. And as he tried to create independence from the British Empire. Anyway, this one, though, is a whole nother movie. I do like movies, but Gandhi was a best picture in this one. Um, yeah, is from the movie Tender Mercies, which I'm going to have some quotes from it that I found. I was on my walk this morning and I went, wow. And I love Tender Mercies. It's a bit of a darker movie. Um, but anyway, I'll describe it in a second. But I also wanted to say that one of the things that becomes, no, I'll bring that up after. So let me do it this way. The Tender Mercies quote. Yeah. So I'm just going to read it. Now, let me give a little history if you haven't seen that particular movie. It's a fantastic movie. Robert Duvall of the star. On my first take, I couldn't remember the woman. Tess Harper. She is, they're the main characters. They're just fabulous. And she has a little, she's a single mother. Her husband was killed in Vietnam. And she has this little gas station hotel thing with 3 rooms or something, you know. She's just making ends meet. And he's a drunk. Robert Duvall's a drunk, former country singer writer. I guess he was very successful, divorced. And it's kind of his revitalization in life and how she helps, and fabulous movie. So he goes through life. He meets her, marries her, marries Tess Harper. Her name's Rosalie. He's got the greatest accent. I'm going to have a quote here, and I can't do his accent. It's fabulous. But at the end, he has another hardship. His daughter is killed in an automobile accident. He's out there hoeing this little piece of land, and 10 yards by 10 yards. And he says, I'm going to read it. There it is on the screen for you. I don't know why I wandered out to this part of Texas drunk, which is how the movie starts. And you took me in and pitied me and helped me to straighten out and marry me. That's kind of what the movie is. Why? But that's the key word there. Why? Why did that happen? God, the way he presents this. Is there a reason that happened? And Sonny, that's Rosalie's son, little maybe 8, 9-year-old, And Sonny's daddy died in the war. My daughter killed in an automobile accident. Why? See, I don't trust happiness. I never did. I never will. That's the quote. Now, I don't trust happiness. I never did. I never will. I'm not. That's not the purpose here. But that why? Why did that happen? This really kind of moves me, and the reason is, in my meditation, it's amazing how many times, as I'm meditating on the oneness, on where the truth is here, not on letting go of the Maya, letting go of the stuff. Because you, as my last video said, the really video, that if we spin ourselves trying to look into all the answers there, all the why did that happen, we seldom get the good answer. Punditry doesn't give us the answers, but if the more we seek the love and the happiness, the oneness, God, the more we find truth. And I find that to be remarkably accurate and truthful. And so this here, why did that happen? How many times I've seen or things have come up that I've just looked at and said, I didn't do that. I don't know how did that happen? Why did this blessing, this good thing happen? But I didn't feel, Jim didn't feel that I was the cause. In the Ramakrishna books, they say that you're not the doer. And boy, is that ever real to me. Not in all aspects of life, but in certain aspects where I just go, how did that happen? And I've chronicled those. I've memorialized them in these videos where there's just these times in life. I mean, I can say as much as my wife and I mention it all the time, our wonderful sons. How did that happen? And there's everything. Yeah. So there are other aspects of life, from how did that car miss us? I remember my wife and I getting our first car, and somebody was going to ram right into us, and then suddenly it wasn't. And I remember looking at each other going, how did that happen? So it goes back to this quote, why did that happen? Why? So they're not all, many of them were good things, blessings, grace, if you want to call it. And some of them were, how'd that happen? It was a negative. So in this quote, he had, Rosalie basically cared for him, and she was very religious, and he was baptized, and his life got better, and he became a successful singer-songwriter again, to a degree. And yeah, so it's really a great movie. Now, I think it ends at that point with him throwing a football with Sonny. I don't know, I can't recall if she said anything, but there was another little interesting quote, and I thought it was moving, and it also explains the title of the movie. And it was in the middle of the movie where she's laying in bed waiting for him to come home, hoping he didn't again start drinking. And she says, I love you, and every night when I say my prayers and I thank the Lord for his blessings and his tender mercies to me, you and Sonny had the list. And I think that's really beautiful. And so it's a movie on faith, no faith, how to redo life, get life going again, ups and downs in life. Great movie. I'll just leave it at that. But I brought that up and I titled it that because the big quote that's coming up here, so let me take this off for a second. All right. The main quote and the purpose of all this is, there's my books, it's a unification of all the religions. It's fascinating how this man, and it's from this book, The Sermon on the Mount, by Swami Prabhavananda, if you ever want to look him up. Now, what's great about this book is it's a current read. He wrote this, I hope you all can see that, Prabhavananda. And I don't know if it was 1970s, 80s that he passed away, but he was actually a Swami, I believe, in the LA Vedanta Center. And boy, what an unbelievable writer, how he can, all the religious, spiritual paths can be unified by this gentleman. And he spoke a lot on Christianity, the Sermon on the Mount, and he spoke a lot, of course, he was a disciple of Vedanta Hinduism. So talk about the oneness, and that's just to me one of the greatest lines of all. Many paths, same God, same consciousness, and of course the other is many words, same truth. So he, in this book, in this particular chapter, so how does all this segue into all of this? I don't know. I opened up that book last week and it came to this page and I went, wow, because it brings up humility. Boy, did I have a ton of ego and a ton of stuff that I had to let go of. I happily admit, embarrassingly a little bit, but there's just so many things that are drawn together on this quote, and that's what I wanted to bring up. And in a funny way, tender mercies seem to fit the bill too. So in this, he's talking about the Lord's Prayer. Now, I don't know a lot about Christianity, but I have read this book on the Sermon on the Mount, which is great. But when I have to tell a story, when I was 9, 10, 11, 12, I lived in Alabama, and back in the 60s, I don't know what the laws were, but for example, in our little Pop Warner football stuff, they called it YMCA football there, but we actually met at the Baptist church, and they would say the Lord's Prayer. I had no idea what was happening when this first started because I was not brought up Christian. We never went to church, and here's all these guys in their football uniforms saying the Lord's Prayer, and I was just... I even believe they actually said now that I think about it, we had to read a little verse from the Bible in school. And I remember in 4th grade when it came to my turn, it was like, yeah. But they describe some things here. And in this chapter, it's chapter on the Lord's Prayer, he's drawn the parallel in the words of Hinduism, Buddhism, what the Lord's Prayer would mean on those paths. So he's describing, well, let's just kind of get to it. Alabama, talk about a different world now. I don't know what it's like now, but it was fabulous. I loved it there, just so you know. Okay, so here we go. This is the faith we need. And I'm going to interject some things on why I think this was important to me. This is the faith we need. We must know that God's grace. Now this is important. God's grace. Now down here, I looked it up, Wikipedia. Grace is a sharing in the divine life. It is the infused presence of God, a presence that is supernatural, not merely natural. Now remember, I've talked a lot about Hinduism, Buddhism, and in there, yoga means a yoking, a bringing together, in essence, of you with purity and consciousness God. So whatever word you want to use, because Buddha was not one that was professing a quote-unquote God. And in Vedanta Hinduism, they have many, many gods, but they also have the pure consciousness. So use whatever you want when it says God or God's grace. But isn't that interesting? God is a sharing in the divine life, which is the same as the idea of yoga, which is a yoking together or bringing together enlightenment, purity, oneness with who you are. I think that's interesting. So this is the faith we need. We must know that God's grace may be revealed to us at any moment. Yet at the same time, we must be prepared to wait patiently. This is interesting. I know Ramakrishna said you got to love God as if you're being drowned with the same fervor. But at the same time, I know that we have to be patient. This came about because I realized recently that you just can't force it. You cannot force it. You can't think it. You can't try to figure it out. Because if you're doing that and thinkingness, you're just sitting in Maya. You're just sitting in the junk, and you won't get there. It says, few people have learned to live in the expectancy of imminent grace. Most of us feel that so many impurities, so many faults to overcome, so much discipline to work through, that we cannot possibly reach God or consciousness until some distant point in the future. I have felt that. Sometimes I just give up. Yeah. But then it said this, and this is what really got me. This seeming humility is actual vanity. That's what I had been thinking for the last few months. That this is all just ego driven. I'm trying to figure it out through Jim. And I knew that wasn't going to work. And then this quote, this page popped up. This seeming humility is actual vanity because it presupposes that we can know God through our own efforts, our own willpower. That's all nonsense. Take that how you want. I know how I take that. It's saying that through Jim. Now, it doesn't mean spiritual practice doesn't help. It doesn't mean reading the text doesn't help. Anyway, our own struggles will never make us pure or bring us the sight of God. So to me, that's living in the world, thinkingness, pushing it will never do it. No one can buy God with spiritual practices. Dadgummit. Turn that off. Okay. No one can buy God with spiritual practices. The great souls who have attained illumination tell us that enlightenment comes only through divine grace. Again, back to this word grace as a sharing in the divine life. At least the way I understand that, even Buddha, who had a whole different path, was Hindu, went a different path in essence. I don't see it as a different path, but meditated for a long time and then achieved enlightenment. I see that all as the same. Divine grace, enlightenment, illumination, whatever word you want to use. But what was important to me is pushing it ain't going to get you there. Then it skipped a little bit, and then it had a quote from Swami Turiyananda, which I thought was also beautiful. Gosh. And he said, "The Lord is not partial. His grace falls equally upon saint and sinner, just as rain falls on the land. But only the ground which is cultivated produces a good harvest." So a lot of this is talking about how in Christianity, Buddhism, and Buddhism, in essence, you're preparing yourself spiritually for the final whoosh, the final grace. But it can happen to anybody. And I told a story in one of the videos of the pundit that asked for how many lives he had before he would achieve it. And he was all bummed because it was 200 lives or whatever. And the prostitute, who was full of love and full of caringness for her family, was whisked away with grace very quickly. Great story in the Ramakrishna book. It's probably a story just throughout India, but I only read it in the Ramakrishna book. Anyway, then it goes on to say, and so in other words, I think that's a beauty because, again, ego is what gets in the way. So thinking we're ahead of somebody else or I know something more, it's a fact when I say just because I'm talking about these things, that doesn't mean I know more or I'm further along my path. Maybe I'm the caboose. I don't know. Yeah. And then it says, when it says in the Lord's Prayer, "And forgive us our debts and we forgive our debtor as we forgive our debtors." I remember hearing that when I was in Alabama in 4th grade going, what? Really? What does that mean? I never found out until just now. But then he goes on and describes to a Hindu or a Buddhist what that means. And this is great because it talks about karma. And I think this is the greatest definition of karma I've ever seen. A Hindu or Buddhist, maybe it's a great definition of the mind and how the mind builds. A Hindu or Buddhist would read the debts in this passage as the debts of karma. The word karma stands for a mental or physical act and its consequences. Any thought we think, any action we perform has two consequences. First, it creates an impression on the mind, which means that we are sowing a seed for similar thoughts and actions in the future. Second, it brings, according to the nature of the thought or deed, either happiness or misery. So we are creating our lives. It's our karma. By our own actions and reactions, we are always contracting debts, obligations that must be paid off. That's karma. We alone are responsible for these obligations. We're even responsible for our own character, which has results from our habits of thoughts and actions. There's times when I've sat around, and it's weird. How do you describe it? But it's like I don't see the things. I only see the karma creating. It's like It's like a wiggle worm of stuff that's creating the result that we see. That's karma. Anyway, I'm just leaving that there so anybody can read it again. It's beautiful, and that's again on page 83 through 97 in this Sermon on the Mount book. What a great definition of karma. They just had the movie, what do you think? I watch movies all the time, but anyway, I do like certain ones, like Gandhi and Tender Mercies, and then they just had, from a great book, Shogun. And they had a miniseries, and in that, and in the book as well, they're constantly saying karma ne, which is basically saying this is just our karma and we have to live it out. And interesting. So there it is, a beautiful thing. And then the quote continues, which is fabulous. It now says, what binds us to the law of karma? The law of cause and effect. What binds us to the law of karma? The law of cause and effect. Our sense of ego, which makes us feel separate from God. So that's the end quote. And again, it kind of all, this all wraps it all together. That it kind of talks about how the mind works. It talks about how karma works. It talks about what you're letting go of in meditation and in life, and trying, even in our living of life of helping others, helps us let go. Remember the four immeasurables, which I think are fantastic from Buddha. Wanting others to be happy, feeling the joy of others, the whole idea of letting go, and the whole idea of serving others. There's your religious practice. Could be your psychological practice. But what will happen then is we as spirit become more connected to that allness, God, if you will. And it's when we aren't connected in that way that all the junk starts to happen, and we start spinning around in all the junk, and anger builds up. And let me take this off. I hope you've had enough. You can always go back to it. Yeah, I know that took me a long time to kind of like find a way in my meditation through the four immeasurables of Buddha, and just meditating on sattva. Remember, sattva is the energy flow activity of love and harmony. And as long as I'm living in that, everything else tends to go away. It percolates up and goes away. And I admit, my life had a lot of karma, selfishness, ego, and coupled with that is pain. And letting go of that, those habits worked in a way, in kind of in an ugly way in some ways, but they helped me in a bit. And that's my biggest challenge, is how to have my religious practice as I also live as a householder. Remember, there's the living as a monk, but there's living as a householder in the real world. And so a lot of these things are written to a monk, but we as in living in a householder, living in life, making money, paying bills, raising a family, it's a little bit different. As my family knows, I've got a lot of horsepower angst on protecting the family. Boy, does that ever get me going. Something happens and boom. But anyway, I have to also admit that I had a lot of dumbass egomania growing up. I apologize. I don't know what to say. I don't think it does any good. And again, you just let go of it all. Let go of it all. Yeah. Admit it all. Let go of it all. You don't want to live in the past with all those memories. You don't want to even live in the future. You just are. You live in the now. Maybe that brings us back to the 60s book, Be Here Now. All of these things in many ways are very similar. And that we're letting go of stuff and finding who we really are. As many of the books in Hinduism, Buddhism, we're letting go of little s self, connecting up with who we really are, big S self. Yeah, so I think maybe I'll leave it with that. Yeah. Great quotes. Great movie, Tender Mercies, as well as Gandhi. So I hope you liked this one. It meant a lot to me. That page, those 2 pages, maybe it was. in that book. And by the way, you can get them. Amazon.com's got them. Go to any Vedanta, the websites for the Ramakrishna Vedanta, they'll have them. But Amazon's real easy. I think it's maybe $10. Okay, that should do it. Thank you.